Hello everyone, it's Greg from Edinburgh Renaissance Fencing Academy here. In today's video I'm going to review 3 training swords that I believe would be suitable for training in the Grassi style or any similar late 16th century Italian system of swordsmanship. These swords are all off-the-shelf models direct from the catalogues of the relevant manufacturers. I'll put links to their websites in the description below this video. In each case, I'm going to be considering how well the sword handles in comparison to real original antiques. So I will include average specifications for a typical late 16th century Italian sword here. Okay, so let's move on to the first review. Right, our first sword is from Fabri Antique. So they are an Italian swordsmiths. They're quite traditional in their approach, and I believe it is a family-run business. This particular sword is closely modelled on a specific original weapon held in a museum in Bologna. And as such, the specifications for the weapon are very good. The original is actually at the shorter and lighter end of the historical spectrum, but obviously it is within acceptable parameters. So basically that means the weapon weighs around 1.2 kilograms and has a blade length of, I believe, around 103 centimeters, more or less. Very good specifications. The production quality is also very good on this weapon. It feels really nice in the hand. It looks great. Really nice engraving work on the hilt with the classic Renaissance cherub design. So actually a very pleasing weapon in the hand and to the eye as well. There are only 2 downsides to this sword. One of them is a minor point. In my opinion, Deltine make the point of balance a little bit too close to the hand in their swords. I would like a little bit more presence in the blade and a little bit more of a tip-heavy feel for thrust-oriented fencing. But honestly, this is a small down point. It's not really a big deal. For many people, the biggest drawback will be the cost. You need to speak to the manufacturer directly to find the up-to-date price for this weapon, but you should expect to pay over £500 for this, which is obviously quite a considerable amount of money for an off-the-shelf model. But overall, this one is highly recommended and it does make for an excellent sword for Grassi style fencing. Just a quick note to say that Deltine have a whole 16th century section of their catalogue, so please do take a look at that. However, some of their swords are fitted with hilts which use this very thin round section steel bar for the side rings. In the experience of my club, this design of swept hilt does not stand up to repeated cuts and heavy attacks, so it does sustain damage relatively easily. So I would recommend not going for one of these kind of thin barred swept hilts. But the cherub hilted sword with the thicker, sturdier side rings is in fact very durable, and there are a few similar models on there which would be good as well. Our next sword comes from Fabri Armorum. Fabri Armorum are a Czech swordsmiths. I believe that they started as a battle reenactment supplier, but over the years have branched out, and they do produce weapons which are suitable for historical fencing as well. This particular sword we're looking at is of a generic design, so it's not modelled on a specific historical sword. There are some options that you can customize when you place your order, including some of the details of the hilt, the grip and the pommel. So you can choose those as you like, which is a nice option. They also produce 3 different types of blade for their swords. There's a Hema blade, a light battle blade, and a heavy battle blade. I actually recommend that you go for the heavy battle blade. The light battle blade and Hema blades are a little bit too light in my opinion, and they will bring the overall weight of the weapon below the range that we're looking for, the historical range, and will also move the point of balance too close to the hand, so the sword won't really handle appropriately. I believe that their Hema blade is primarily intended for sports tournaments and is almost certainly too flexible as well, which will also affect the handling of the weapon. The heavy battle blade will bring the weight of the weapon to 1.3 kilograms, which is exactly in the middle, so it's average for a late 16th century sword, so this is really good. The only downside is that it is slightly too short. It's less than 100 centimeters long, so that is a little bit of a drawback. Overall, the production quality is very good in terms of durability. Fabri Armorum's weapons are really tough. They'll stand up to a lot of abuse, quite frankly, and they're very unlikely to break. So from that point of view, the production quality is really good. Aesthetically, they are okay. They don't look hideously ugly. They don't look really beautiful either, in my opinion. So these are more functional weapons rather than fancy weapons, but that is, of course, totally fine. In terms of cost, this sword is actually really good value for money. You will need to check the manufacturer's catalogue for up-to-date prices, and of course pay attention to exchange rates and import taxes and things like that. But I believe the cost for this is approximately £300. That is a really good deal for a usable swept-hilted weapon. So the only downside to the sword, really, in my view, is that the blade is a little bit too short. However, with the heavy battle blade fitted, it does give you a pretty good sense of how the period swords handled and moved, so the weight and the point of balance are actually okay. The only extra thing I have to say about the Fabri Armorum option is that this company do still make most of their money from selling reenactment gear. So if your order coincides with the peak season for reenactors buying their gear, you may find you get a little bit of delay on the order. But if you manage to place your order off-season, then the turnaround for their weapons is pretty good, comparable to Deltine at around 3 months on average. But I should stress again, you can suffer delays if it coincides with a big order from a bunch of reenactors. Our last sword today comes from Black Fencer. Black Fencer are a Spanish manufacturer. They're most well known for producing synthetic training swords, actually, but in recent times they've branched out with their steel generation line of blunt metal training swords. And this sword we're looking at is their early rapier, early swept hilt rapier, which comes from that steel generation range. It is another generic design, so it's not based on a specific original, but in terms of the aesthetics, it is a pretty good representation of a typical late 16th century swept hilted sword. The overall length and weight of the weapon are a little bit below the historical range. But I have to say that the sword actually handles surprisingly well when you pick it up. So the point of balance of this weapon is actually really good. And that kind of makes up for the fact that the blade length is a little below 100 centimeters, I believe, and the weight is somewhere between 1.1 and 1.2 kilograms, so maybe just a little bit too light. But the point of balance is very good. In terms of production quality, this weapon is very good. I think it would stand up to a reasonable amount of punishment in week-to-week training. It looks pretty nice for a generic model, actually. The proportions are not 100% accurate or authentic, but they're close enough that it looks decent. There is one element you have to be careful about, though. When you place the order, there's an option to have an extra hilt section added. You must take this option. The extra hilt section is actually a quillen block, an extended quillen block that rises up into the ricasso section of the sword, and it basically allows you to position your thumb in a good position to help control the weapon. The extra hilt option is historically accurate. If you don't include it, the weapon feels really strange in the hand. So I'll stress just one more time, you must take the extra hilt option. It's only a small additional cost, so nothing too much to worry about. In terms of downsides, the weapon is a little bit too short, but really that's it. Otherwise, this is a very nice training sword. In terms of cost, I would say this is a mid-range weapon. You could expect to pay something in the region of £350 or maybe a little bit more. As always, check the import taxes and all the other miscellaneous costs and factors like the exchange rate. But yeah, somewhere between £350 and £400. So a very good option for a mid-range sword, I think. The only other extra thing to say about this is that Black Fencer collaborate with a London-based company called Tempus Fugitives. And Tempus Fugitives act as the official UK distributor for Black Fencer products. So if you are interested in this sword, it's best to look at Tempus Fugitives first. And if it's not possible to source the sword through them, you can then go direct to Black Fencer and place your order there. Okay. So that concludes our sword reviews for today. These three off-the-shelf models are all suitable for Di Grassi training or for similar Italian styles of fencing. Obviously, they are not perfect. You'll notice that all three weapons are actually at the shorter end of the length spectrum in terms of blade specifications. If you want to get something that's really authentic in its handling and design, then you do need to spend the money to get a custom sword made by a reputable swordsmith. But that's really a big project. Does take a lot of money and often takes a lot of time as well. So if you are looking to quickly invest in a reliable training weapon, one of the three models I've shown today or something very similar to them would be a good option. Just got one final thing to say, which is there are, for some reason, many good options on the market for early 16th century swords. And also, there are very many good options for late 17th century swords. But for some reason, this kind of middle period, the era of the swept-hilted rapier, is not particularly well served. I feel like a lot of the weapons on the market are not well designed and they don't really handle in a historically authentic fashion. So the three swords that I've reviewed today are recommended for people to use in late 16th century Italian fencing training. Okay, that's it for today's video. Take care, everyone. See you soon. Bye.